Hello, everyone. If you've just joined us, my name is Oliver Webster. I am the Head of Systems and Services at Stagetext, which is the charity for deaf access in the arts. So what we're going to go over today is deaf awareness basics. What is end-to-end accessibility and why does it matter? Understanding access provision, some quick wins for you to take home, and then a Q&A at the end. There is a Q&A function, so if you've got some questions that come up, stick them in there and we'll get to them at the end. So to start off with, we're going to look at deaf awareness basics. This is just to give you a grounding. It's not going to be exhaustive, but it will give you a good place to start from. I'm going to start off by introducing different forms of deafness. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got deaf, deafened, and hard of hearing. And these are all different types of people with different types of experiences and different skill sets, which I'm going to go through now. To start off with, we have what we call capital D deaf. You don't say capital D, you just say deaf, but when you're distinguishing from lowercase d deaf, it helps to say that. Capital D deaf is a specific group of people who identify as deaf people and the deaf community, which is why it's got a capital D. These people are usually born deaf, born completely deaf or with very little hearing, and they're usually born in deaf families, so they will use sign language as their first language. They'll grow up using it as their main language, their families will use it, their schools, friends will use it, so there's a real sense of community around this shared language. So they've got a strong sense of identity around the word deaf, which again is why it's got a capital D. The best form of access for this group of deaf people is sign language interpretation. It's their first language, it's what they understand. That is the best way to be accessible to people who are deaf. Sign language is a separate language from English. It follows its own grammatical structure. It's not a one-to-one representation like writing is. It's more like translating from English to French. So when you're thinking about your access, it's really important to include BSL because it's a huge part of it. Then you've got lowercase d deaf. This is people who become deaf at a young age or later in life. They may have grown up with hearing and then lost most or all of their hearing, or they may have a little bit of hearing from birth. Because they've got some hearing or some experience of being hearing, they will often have some English skills because they grew up a little bit or they've got enough to learn. So they will often be fluent in both English and sometimes BSL. However, they will usually use English as their first language, and they'll often use hearing aids or cochlear implant and lip reading to support this. This is actually where I fit in. I was born deaf with about an 80% drop off from average hearing. My family are all hearing, and I was raised in a hearing world. So I wasn't taught sign language. I was given hearing aids and taught to lip read and speak English. Then we've got people who are deafened and hard of hearing. So people who are deafened are people who become deaf through accident, illness, or noisy work environment, such as if you're working in the armed forces or in factories. The noises can damage your hearing, and then you can become deaf sort of in your 30s or 40s. Or you can get illness. There's been a huge increase in the number of people who become deaf due to COVID because that has affected their hearing. People who are deafened usually become deaf, as I said, in that kind of middle age or later, which means they spent the first 30 years of their life being a hearing person. So they will often not know sign language, and they're often unlikely to pick up sign language. So they will also use hearing aids, cochlear implants, and sometimes they will learn lip reading. Hard of hearing is people who lose their hearing due to old age. So this is our grandparents who, they're getting on and they turn the TV up louder and it's louder and they're just not hearing it. And it's just due to age. And so similar to people who are deafened, they've spent the first 50, 60 years of their life being a hearing person. So they're not going to learn sign language later on in life. They're going to use hearing aids and maybe lip reading. So that's just a quick whistle-stop tour. And that just demonstrates that you've got these different types of deaf people who have different sets of skills. This is part of why Stagetext focuses on text-based access. It provides the most amount of access for the widest range of people. However, that's not to say that you shouldn't be thinking about both captions and subtitles and BSL. Both are hugely important to different types of people, and access is a multi-pronged effort. It's not one size fits all. Now, one of the questions in the poll was what proportion of the UK are deaf, deafened, and hard of hearing? The number one vote was 1 in 5, with the next being 1 in 10, and the last being 1 in 3. The result is 1 in 3 people in the UK are deaf, deafened, and hard of hearing, which is a lot more than people think it is. And certainly, I remember when I was growing up, I was one of 3 deaf people in my school. The idea that every third person is sharing in the same experience to me is, wow, novel. But we know that there is 1 in 3 people. The next question was what proportion of these deaf people, which is 18 million in the UK, know BSL? The top vote was 10%, the second vote was 50%, and the last vote was 1%. The answer is 1% know BSL, which again, it seems to be counterintuitive. People think of deaf people and they think of sign language because it's very visual. Now, again, I want to emphasize it is really important that sign language is there and it is available. However, a lot of places will think deaf access equals sign language and you're done. And a lot of deaf people don't know sign language. I don't know sign language. If I go to an organization and say, I'm deaf, what have you got for me? And they say, oh, we've got a signing tour. It's no good to me. Great for people who use it, no good for me. Looking at age-related hearing loss, 50% of people over 50 and 80% of people over 70 have age-related hearing loss. So as I said earlier, in my family, I used to be the only deaf one, but now my grandparents have hearing aids, my dad has hearing aids, my uncles have hearing aids. We've all got relatives who have hearing aids who are a bit older. It's quite funny. They all tell me now that they understand the experience of being deaf. But I would say that going deaf in your 60s is not the same as growing up deaf from birth. But I understand what they're trying to say. But if you are targeting an older audience in any of your exhibitions, shows, events, whatever, you need to be thinking about deaf access because we know that huge numbers of people who are in an older population are deaf. However, many of them won't identify themselves as having access needs. Despite the growing population and the growing acceptance around deafness and hearing, there's still a lot of stigma, particularly amongst an older population, where it can be seen as a sign of aging and people don't want to kind of come to terms with that. This can prevent people from realizing or admitting that they have a hearing loss and prevent them from making use of the services out there that support them in that. In some cases, the loss can be so gradual over such a long period of time that people don't notice it. They're just turning things up a little bit louder until eventually it's at maximum volume and they're still not hearing it. There was a study in 2015 which found that on average it takes 10 years between when someone notices a problem with their hearing to when they ask a doctor for help with hearing loss. That's 10 years just to get comfortable enough to ask for help in a private room with confidentiality. So thinking about what that means for people coming into your building, your website, a lot of people are going to have access needs who are not going to want to say that up front, who are not going to be checking your access page, who are not going to be checking your access information, but a lack of accessibility is still going to impact on their enjoyment and their experience. And this is why Stagetext advocate for something that we call open captioning. You may have heard the term closed captions. This is often used interchangeably with subtitles or captions, but it does mean something specific. So open captions are captions which are always on. So in our work in the theatre, we put captions on screens on the side of the stage. This means that the whole audience can see it. The access is openly available from step one. Nobody had to come up and ask for it. They just attend and it's there. So this means that I, as a deaf person, can go along with my hearing friends and we can just sit and enjoy it. If I've got a family member who I think would benefit from it, I can say, hey, come with me to the caption show. I need the caption. And then they can go, oh, wow, that was really helpful to me as well. So open access and open captions mean that those people who aren't identifying themselves as having access needs are still getting the benefit of the accessibility. And under the social model of disability, people shouldn't have to adjust themselves and their behavior by asking for extra equipment. It should be accessible already in the way that it's built. Closed captions are captions that are turned on by the individual viewer. So, for example, YouTube or Netflix has what we call closed captions, because if I'm watching something on YouTube and I turn the subtitles on, it's only on for me. It doesn't turn the subtitles on for anyone else watching the video at the same time. So it's closed just to me specifically. So, like I said, open captions are what we generally advocate for. However, there are some limitations in that you can only do one language and you can only have one set of captions that the whole audience sees at the same time. If you're using closed captions, you can have multiple languages. So if you're doing something internationally where there's translation, you get a lot more flexibility there. And you also give more flexibility in terms of controlling the appearance of it, which can be important for people who have dyslexia or other kinds of neurodivergence that affect how they are reading the text. So there's more flexibility. So when you're thinking about open captions or closed captions, think about who your audience is and which option is going to be best. I would encourage you to think of open captions as the default and closed captions being an intentional and purposeful move away from open captions rather than closed captions being the default. So that was a really quick background about deaf people as a whole. In short, a third of the UK population has some sort of hearing-based access requirements and will be impacted by how accessible you are. So now we're going to have a look at what is end-to-end accessibility and why does it matter to you. So every venue or organization that has a website has at least one visitor journey. And you probably have a few different visitor journeys for different types of visitors. For example, you have first contact, which I'm representing on here as an alien. So this is when someone comes across your advertising, your social media post, something that you're putting out in the world, and the first time they see what you're doing. This leads to interest, which I've represented with a magnifying glass. And so they go to look for more information. Perhaps they look at your other post on your social media profile, or they go to your website. Let's say then you have an exhibition or you're putting on a webinar that they're interested in, then they will book that in. So they're engaging with what you're putting out, which I've represented with a calendar icon. This leads to them perhaps attending your building or your online event, like what we've got here today, which I've represented with a little museum icon and a window with someone pointing at it, a whiteboard rather. And then after this event, you presumably want them to join your mailing list or to buy something from your shop and collect feedback. And if that's been successful, then you'll send out your regular newsletter and they will start all over again with your next event. So this is your kind of visitor journey. End-to-end accessibility is the idea that every step in this journey needs to be accessible in the same way to the same people. So if your social media has subtitles, great, your first contact is accessible. If that then directs people to your website and your website has got trailers and videos, but they're not accessible, you lose them because even though the first step is good, Second step, they're not able to access it. If your social media and your website are accessible, but your booking system requires people to phone up to book a ticket, you're going to lose them because it's not accessible. If your social media, website, and booking process are accessible, but the event is not accessible, you will lose them. They're not going to turn up. And you get the idea. Basically, this whole journey they go through, every step of that needs to be accessible to the same person. If you want people to go through that whole thing, the whole thing needs to be able for them to go through. And earlier I said it needs to be accessible in the same way to the same people. What I mean by that is that accessible describes a whole host of different things. And you need to be specific and consistent in what you are doing. If a webinar is accessible to deaf people because it's got live subtitles and sign language interpretation, but it doesn't have audio description, it's not accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired, they're not going to attend. But if the booking system is accessible to people who are blind and visually impaired, but it's not accessible to deaf people because it requires phoning up, then you're going to lose deaf people. So then, even though these two steps are both accessible, you're still losing both groups of people because there isn't a continuous accessible journey for either of them. So that's the key point I'm trying to get across. However, it's not only is it important to be accessible, but it's important to tell people that you're accessible. Being accessible at the first point of contact is a good start to indirectly let people know that you are going to be accessible. But a lot of people are used to facing barriers at some point in their journey. So you've got to go a little bit further to let them know this whole journey is going to be accessible to them. They are welcome and you want them there. So that's all great in theory, but what can you actually do in practice? There's a whole host of resources and services available. I'm going to cover the ones that are available for deaf audiences and how you can use them. So we're going to start off with the easy one, which is digital subtitles. You all know what this is, I assume. Digital subtitles are everywhere these days. You've all seen them. This is your #1 tool for making your online space accessible. If you're not familiar, subtitles are a text representation of the audio of a recorded video. So the dialogue will appear as text in time with what is said in the video. So for example, a video on social media and so on, where there's music and dialogue, you will have everything coming up as it happens in the video so that people like me who can't hear what's going on can still understand. They're also used for videos that you might use on your website, so not just social media, so your website, or an installed exhibition in a physical space, or if you film a documentary, or if you've got videos on site that help people to navigate around. Anywhere that you've got a video, subtitles can and should be used to make those videos accessible. The great thing about recorded video is that it's prepared in advance, so you've got time to really make sure the subtitles are top-notch and perfect. To create subtitles, a trained subtitler will be sent the video file and they'll work through it. They'll listen to what is said, they'll listen to the sound effects, to the music, they'll do research, and they'll work out exactly what's happening. And then they will format the subtitles, typing out all of that information, taking into account best practice in terms of line length, where to split a sentence, formatting, labels, and so on. There's a huge amount of thought that goes into subtitles. And as I've kind of alluded to there, crucially, these subtitles don't just represent the words, but they also include these access elements, such as name labels and sound labels where appropriate. And it's these access elements that take it from kind of being text on a screen to being accessible. Without these elements, it's not really going to be accessible subtitles. These are sometimes called SDH or descriptive subtitles. SDH stands for subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. This is quite outdated language from back in the day. I am not the deaf. I'm a deaf person. So we don't really use SDH a huge amount, but a lot of people do know it. So you might come across it. Descriptive subtitles is a newer term that some people use. However, I think that it implies that the subtitles will be descriptive rather than representative, which isn't necessarily best practice. So the language is still evolving. Even calling them just accessible subtitles isn't the full picture, as some people with dyslexia or who are neurodivergent prefer subtitles that don't have those access elements, as there's less text to process. So it is really important that you're offering choices and that you explain what these choices mean. Once the subtitler has formatted the subtitles, they will export that in a file type. SRT is the most commonly used ones. So if you come across people talking about an SRT file, it's a subtitle file. But some platforms for hosting videos have other types that they need. Just speak to the subtitler, check the platform's documentation, and tell the subtitler what file they need, and they'll usually be fine to give you whatever you need. Now, what I've just described are subtitles created manually by a subtitler, but of course, there are automatic options available. Each have their own pros and cons. Manual subtitles are still more accurate and more accessible compared to automatic ones. We haven't yet found an auto subtitle platform that is able to take all of the best practice conventions into consideration, such as whether or not a speaker is on screen or off screen, when to split a line, when to include a sound label. Maybe one day, but it's not there yet. However, automatic subtitles are much easier to implement and much more affordable. Most platforms have some sort of free automatic subtitles integrated, which you can just turn on. No need to plan ahead or book a subtitler in. What I will say is that automated subtitles, AI, are based on statistical models, which means that they trend towards the average, which is fine if you're talking about the average and average topics, but a lot of arts and culture isn't about the average, it's about the exceptional and the unusual, and AI isn't quite there just yet. Here are a couple of examples of digital subtitles on screen, just in case you're not familiar. So we've got 3 pictures. In the top left is a screenshot of YouTube's subtitling interface. Within that picture is another picture of a stage and some people, and then beneath that is a timeline with a kind of waveform audiogram, which is used to time the subtitles. Beneath that, so on the bottom left, we've got a screenshot of a MacBook laptop with a video playing where there's a guitarist playing the guitar, and a picture of the subtitles, which says, "You're standing there all wide-eyed like you've only just seen the light." And then on the right-hand side, we've got a screenshot of the National Theatre's National Theatre at Home streaming platform with the show She Stoops to Conquer. So there's a picture of some actors on stage in historical dress with the subtitle, "If you knew what a scene of constraint and ill nature lies before me." So these are all pictures of subtitles being used on a video online on a computer. So you've got subtitled social media videos and you funnel people to your website. The next thing to think about is your website accessibility. There's 2 key things to bear in mind here: how accessible the website itself is, and what information do you provide about access for your events, exhibitions, and so on. In terms of the accessibility of the website itself, the website should comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. This is a massive, really comprehensive technical documentation about how to make a website accessible. I'm not going to be able to cover that in a minute, but I suggest speaking to your web developers about it. They should have some familiarity with it. But in terms of simple things that you can take away today, I want you to think about information density. A lot of complex words on a page can be hard to read, and you want to bear in mind that a lot of BSL users are not necessarily fluent in English. In fact, the average reading age in the UK is 9 years old. So if you're putting out information to the public, you want to aim any page of text at that level of comprehension. For BSL users, it's often also best to have a video that interprets all of the text into BSL because that can be easier to follow. Again, it's in their first language, so it's easier for them to understand. If you've got any videos, these should of course be subtitled, and you want your navigation to be easy and information that people need needs to be easy to find. If you've got an online booking system, perfect, great for deaf people. The phone is not our friend. However, this online system needs to work with access discount if you offer them. I can't tell you the number of times where I want to go to an event and there's an online system and I go onto it, but to get the access discount that I'm registered for, I have to phone up to do it because the online system won't take it. And I don't really want to do that. I'm not great on the phone. And if I ask someone to phone on my behalf, they will often get told that I have to be the one to phone them because I'm the one that's registered. So it's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because it's, they're trying to give me this access discount, but the means of accessing it is not accessible. So yeah, if you've got a booking system, make sure that it can include these kind of circumstances. The second thing I mentioned earlier was access information about your events and location. So this is about giving people the information they need to know that whatever they're thinking of attending will be accessible for them. A recent Ewan's Guide study showed that 62% of respondents will avoid going to a venue if it hasn't shared accessibility information. And I can attest to this. If I don't know for a fact that something's not going to be accessible to me, I'm not spending my time and money to go to it when I could do something that I know is accessible. So for any event listing, whether it's on site or online, you should always include information about what access provision is being provided, or if for any reason access provision is not needed. So for example, if there are videos, but the videos are all silent, you can say, these videos are silent and therefore there are no subtitles. Otherwise, people won't know if it's not subtitled because it's silent or not subtitled because it's not been made accessible. So you want to make that really clear. One of the questions in the poll was whether or not you tell people if something's not accessible or you don't say anything. And I'm really pleased to see that most of you said we should tell people when it's not accessible, and I completely agree with that. If it's not accessible, this is a really good place to ask for requests for access, which you can then use as ammunition to push for more provision. As I mentioned earlier, it should always be accessible preemptively, but people with the budgets, budgets are tight, and so they may say, if no one's asking for it, we're not going to do it. And in that case, give people the opportunity to ask for it. If you have an event listing page, then offering people the ability to filter to only show events with the access provision they need will go a long way to building loyalty. When I visit a website and I can filter their events to only show me the things that have subtitles, that is something special. That honestly wins me over completely. Even if there's nothing on there, I will say, my local cinema has got they've got a page which I can go to, which shows just the subtitle screenings. 95% of the time I check it, there's nothing on there. They do subtitle screenings like once every 3 or 4 months. But because it's so easy for me to check and find that out, I go back and I keep checking. if I had to look through every single one of their listings every single time to find out that there's nothing for me, I'm not going to keep doing that. So even if you haven't got accessible events, I would still say give people the opportunity to filter so that they know quickly and easily, and they'll be more willing to come back and check again, and then they'll find the accessible events when you've got them on there. You also want to include an access page that has your accessibility statement and describes in more general terms what is available. This should be reachable from the homepage in a single click, usually under an accessibility tab in the bottom footer. That's where people expect to see it. Stick it there, you'll be grand. This access page should also give people a dedicated access email, ideally access@yourorganization.com. It's important that this is a separate email from your ticket office or reception email. If you use a generic email address like box office at whatever, people won't feel that their query is going to the right person. So by giving them an email that says access, they know this is the right person. Even if it's just redirecting and the email goes to the same person as your ticket office email, just saying the word access gives people confidence that they're in the right place. So that's a really easy thing you can do. I have on screen an example of an event page and what the ideal event page would look like. So you can see we've got the title event, we've got the event details, and then on the right-hand side, we've got a list of dates of when the event is running, and then we've got access shows, which state when is the caption show, when's the audio describe show, when's the relax performance, and then we've got the booking link. So you just want to make it really clear and simple to know when do I, with my access needs, go to see this. Here's an example of an access page. It's got the general statement and the access contact details. So the statement, I'll read it out to you. It says, we aim to ensure our venue and our website are as accessible as possible to ensure everyone is able to enjoy their visit to the fullest. We have a range of accessible events on throughout the year. These are listed on the What's On page and labeled, as well as through the links below. If you have any questions, get in contact. And then they've got these 4 big buttons that says venue access, caption performances, audio described, and relax performances. So it's really clear, me with my access needs, where do I go? What does this venue believe in? They want me to see this, let's go. So your first contact was accessible and you got people to your website. They were wowed at the number of accessible events that you have, and they booked in to see a webinar or even a lecture or talk and draw workshop. Now you have to make sure that those events are accessible. So live subtitling is what you will use to make these events accessible. Live subtitling is like digital subtitles. They are a text representation of what has been said, except they are being typed live and output immediately during an event. So we've got live subtitles today being provided by Trish. These are used for unscripted events, scripted events being staged theatrical productions, unscripted being meetings, webinars, online talks, workshops, anything really. Even if there's a planned script, we don't expect speakers to stick to the script as rigidly as actors in a performance do, which is why they are typed live. These live subtitles can be shown on any internet-connected screen, in Zoom, on tablets, and really any display with a connection. To create these, a speech-to-text reporter, or STTR, will have an audio feed, either direct from a mic if they're on site, or over the internet if they are remote, and they will type out what is said using a specialist phonetic keyboard. So it's not like a keyboard that you and I are used to. It's not a QWERTY keyboard. It's specially designed for live subtitling. And using this, STTRs can type up to 300 words a minute at about 99% accuracy. However, since it's being done live, there's no time to think and do research and to double check to make sure it's completely accurate on the spot, which means that even though it's live, there's a lot of work that can be done in advance to prep the STTR and provide them with the information that will make their live subtitles more accurate. This includes any script or speaker notes, any names or technical terms or jargon that might come up, any acronyms, dates. The more information you can give, the more accurate the live subtitles will be. Now, similar to digital subtitles, there are automated options for live subtitling, and the pros and cons are exactly the same. Automated subtitles are more affordable and easier to implement, but they are less accurate and less accessible. And it kind of defeats the point for access provision to be inaccessible. But I am biased towards top-notch access because that's what I need. Here are some pictures that are examples of live subtitles in use. So we've got 4 pictures. The top right shows a crowd of people sitting in a chair looking at a stage, and we've got a person in the foreground who is typing on this phonetic keyboard, and the live subtitles appearing on the laptop in front of them, which gets sent out to the screen. Underneath that, we've got a man in a white shirt who's giving a talk of some kind, and behind him in the background is a screen with the live subtitles appearing. On the top right, we have a group of people who are stood on stage, who are also giving a presentation, and on the wall behind them is a large screen above their heads with the live subtitles appearing. And in the bottom right, we've got a group of people who are also sat on a stage with another screen behind them showing the live subtitles. So they can be used in all sorts of environments. Now, I want to highlight a specific use case of live subtitles, which is a live subtitle tour. Often museums and galleries will have guided tours, which take people through a building and give them lots of really interesting information and history. And these tours can be live subtitled too, even though it's on the move. In this case, the audio would be beamed to an STTR from a phone or a mic. They'll be remote, and they will type up what has been said, and this can then be accessed on any device that has an internet connection, such as a phone or a tablet. Now, there are some key considerations for this specific use case. You want to make sure that the whole tour route has got a strong internet connection, otherwise it's going to drop out. You want to make sure the tour is delivered in an accessible way as well. That means you want to avoid speaking whilst you are walking through, as people won't be able to lip read you. And if they are watching you and they're walking, then looking at the live subtitles will be difficult and they might risk being injured. So you want to move, stop, face the group, and then deliver each section of the tour. You also want to make sure that all the spaces are bright enough for lip reading. So there's a lot of considerations, and I would recommend that the person who delivers the tour attends deaf awareness training, so they're thinking about all of this. Here are some examples of live subtitles being used on tablets for walking tours. So in both cases, we've got a speaker who has got either a phone or a headset, and then the crowd of people around them have all got tablets, which have got text appearing on them, which they are reading whilst also listening to the speaker. The last thing I want to address is staff awareness. It's so important that staff have deaf awareness training, not only so they can directly interact with deaf people with confidence, but so they can integrate that awareness into your policy and your planning. So in terms of your digital journey, it's critical that your marketing team, who are producing content for socials and your website, have awareness training, but also the people involved in event planning, event programming, so that planning for the event, tech for the event, speakers, facilitators, all of them can benefit from understanding what the access provision is for and how people use it. But this also applies throughout your whole organization. Your, front of desk staff, gift shop staff, people giving tours, security. I get a real fear when I see security guards because there's been times where people think I'm being belligerent and misbehaved when really I just haven't heard what instructions they've given me. So you want to make sure that people are aware that, sometimes deaf people aren't gonna jump when you say something. So yeah, awareness is great. Um, Everyone in your organization at all levels is contributing to the experience of your visitors. So to make that experience inclusive and accessible, everyone should have this kind of training and awareness. So those are some of the ways that you can make the different points in your end-to-end journey accessible. There is a lot, I'm not going to lie, and because visitor journeys are complex and they touch on a lot of different elements. So I'm going to give you some quick and easy wins that you can take home right now to increase accessibility at different points. So we have got providing accessible events on a regular basis. This helps you to build up a reputation and loyalty and an audience. Ensure that your marketing is accessible, so make sure your social media videos are subtitled. Send Stagetext your accessible events. We've got a website and a newsletter, and we put everything accessible on there, so send it over to us. Doesn't cost you anything, it's free advertising, and it goes out to our audiences. Connect to your local deaf clubs, schools, and charities. There's a lot of social groups within the deaf community. Find the ones nearby, invite them, host an event for them, get them involved and build those connections. Have a dedicated access email address. Make use of the resources page on the Stagetext website. We're going to send out a link in a little bit. There's free resources on there for you to make use of. And have an access page on your website where you list all of your accessible events. And even better, if you've got a mailing list, which is specifically accessible events that people can sign up to, that is a really great way to build up an audience as well. So that is the session. I've thrown a lot at you. We're going to go into the Q&A now. There's a lot of you here, so we may not get to all your questions. But if we don't, there's some contact details on the page now. So you can email me at Oliver@Stagetext, or we're on Facebook and Twitter or X, Blue Sky, at Stagetext, and on Instagram at stagetext.insta. We're a small charity, but we're always happy to help. So send out your questions to us, and yeah, we'll get back to you. But now, also, here are the DCN details as well. But now we're going to go into the Q&A.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Oliver. That was great. There's so many great nuggets of information in that webinar. I really enjoyed it. I learned myself. So the first one was an anonymous question, but it was asking if you want to create content and train people in-house. This organisation is really keen to teach people around British Sign Language, and they have staff members who are able to do it. What are your thoughts on having a British Sign Language speaker in the training materials who isn't deaf? Is it necessary that they are deaf when they're presenting content like that and training others?
So just make sure I heard you right. So if you're doing training in-house on deaf awareness, how important is it to have a deaf person delivering that training? Is that the question?
Yeah, having a non-deaf person, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to advocate for having, a deaf person because they bring a lot of their own experience. However, if there are no deaf people available, then yes, you can bring in someone who, is hearing. There's a lot of people who do have close connections to the deaf community and to deaf experiences. A term you might come across is CODA, CODA. This stands for Child of Deaf Adults. So these are people who have one or two parents who are deaf, and they will also have a close connection to the deaf community and the close understanding of the experience. So I would, maybe think about bringing someone in like that. But I would say the best is always to have someone who's got first-hand experience.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got another question from Damien, and it's about wanting to do all these things to be accessible in the most ways possible. But when you're doing one-off spending and ongoing cost to do these things, it can build up quite a lot. The question is, how can a small organization best spend their money in this area? And how have you got any tips for prioritizing some of that work?
Yeah, no, I understand budgets are hard times with the budgets out there. What I would say is look towards the things that are going to be the most impactful. Um, you know, Subtitling is great because it can work for so many people. It can be useful for deaf people, it can be useful for people who are neurodivergent, it can be useful for people with English as a second language. So thinking about what is going to be the most impactful and then building from there, particularly if you can then use that to make the case and say, look, we made this thing accessible and people loved it. Please fund us to make something else accessible. So you can build out from there with the kind of evidence of the take up. There will be, I think a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of building that community, because as I said, a lot of people with access needs are used to not being invited, not being included. And so you've got to kind of overcome that hurdle to reach people where they are and get them interested. It's a hard one. I know. I don't want to say pick this over that because it also depends on your audience. If you've got a local school of capital D deaf children, then having something which is specifically about sign language is going to be really impactful because you've got kind of this local audience that really matches up with that. So yeah, think about who are you trying to reach and what's the best way to reach them and start there.
Really good, thank you. I've got another question from Rosa, and this is about she loved the idea of using closed captioning for different languages for live performances. The question is, would it be complicated to achieve from a technological point of view to do something like that? And then, do you know of any venues that are actually offering that as an option at the moment?
Um, from a technological point of view, this is a little bit outside my area of expertise. We don't do translation, we focus on accessibility. But I know that there are places that do it. I think there's a company called Text which do a lot of translation live subtitles at the same time, because they've got people who are in all sorts of different countries. Because that you need someone who can translate and type live subtitles at the same time and do both together, which is not an easy skill. Um, in terms of the technical setup, um, you need an audio feed to go to each person, and then you need the subtitle feed to come back from each. It might be as simple as having a different link that users click onto. I don't know about, say, Zoom, if they've got functionality for picking different languages in their subtitling feature, I'm afraid.
Yes, thank you. A couple more questions that I got in here. So one was from this is another anonymous, but it's around like open and closed captions. Could it be a barrier for people because you can have long text, long sentences of text, and it's really quite quick? And do deaf audiences prefer a different option to that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to subtitles, one of the best practice conventions is not to go really long. Um, it's usually better to have two short lines rather than one long line, because it's easier to see the whole thing in one graph, one glance rather. Um, the best practice conventions are informed by deaf audiences. Deaf audiences want the two short lines, they want the name labels, they want the sound labels, because that's what we need to access what's going on. In the example of name labels, a hearing person can recognize who's speaking based on their voice, but a deaf person may not, especially if that speaker is off screen, so you can't recognize their voice and you can't lip read them. You need to have some way of knowing who is speaking. Um, so yeah, the best practice conventions are there because that's what deaf people want to use. However, I think I mentioned, for people who are neurodivergent, the extra information can be a lot, which is why sometimes people who are neurodivergent will opt for digital subtitles that don't have those access elements. So, the top thing to do would be to give people a choice. Say you can have that, 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 pick whatever you want, but you also want to explain what each of those choices are and what they mean. When I was growing up and when DVDs first arrived on the scene, it was amazing for me because all of a sudden every film I bought had subtitles, but a lot of them would have English subtitles and English SDH or English CC. And I didn't know what that was. No one told me what that was. So I would just pick one at random, just based on vibes. And then years later, find out that, oh, one of them was accessible to me and one of them wasn't. And I didn't know that because no one told me. So make clear, what are you offering? What does that mean for them?
Brilliant, thank you. I've got another question, and this is interesting about getting feedback. So this organisation does a lot of deaf awareness events at the museum, but trying to find the right way of asking for feedback from deaf audiences. Like we've used, say, the written surveys and videos as well. Is there something more effective that would work for you and people in that situation?
So this is they're putting on deaf events in a venue and then collecting feedback from the visitors at the
Yes, I think
event.
so. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, with feedback, the best thing to do is to collect feedback whilst they're there. So, in a presentation, you might want to put a QR code on the last slide and say, before you leave, scan this and do it. You might want to have a paper document at the exit that says, please fill in this feedback whilst you're here. Um, if you're looking for specifically capital D deaf people, a lot of people who are in the deaf community love to talk so much. So if you kind of say, "Can I have 5 minutes of the time to chat?" They will be absolutely on board with that. Particularly if, again, whilst they're there at the event, if you say at the exit, "Can I just ask you a quick question?" You're going to get a lot of information because they want to tell you all of the context, all of the details. So yeah, I would say it's capturing them at that kind of last moment is the best tip, I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've got 2 minutes. I think we've just got time for one more question. For the other questions that we've got in the QA, we're not reached yet. We're going to save them and we'll add those to the resources, some of the answers to those as well. So uh, hopefully that will be okay for you. So this is a question from Chelsea. And so your last question of the day is about, do you have any recommendations for awareness training for their in-house staff?
Yeah, so I mean, Stagetext offers deaf awareness training. There's a lot of organizations that do offer awareness training. I'm trying to think of more names off the top of my head. That yeah, have a look at the charities and organizations that are involved in providing access, providing knowledge. There's tons of people out there who want to help you. Make use of them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for today, Oliver, and thank you everybody for joining us today.